In this video, I've invited my son Isaac to come and talk to you about his side of the story of healing with GAPS and the need for deep nutrition for gut healing, and also the link between gut health and mental health. As you probably know, brain health and mental health is very dependent on gut health. So, in this talk, Isaac shares how changing his diet and healing with food really improved his mental health. I hope that this video will be an encouragement to those of you who have kids that maybe are struggling with mental health issues, or maybe they just need to change their diet to be healthier in other areas, and maybe you're meeting a bit of resistance. Just know that when you need to change the diet and you've worked gradually on it for a while, and it comes to the time where you need to dive deeper, whole foods are no longer enough. You need to dive in and start working on your gut health. It will be hard at first, but the results will be so worth it. Just remember that saying, they'll thank you later. As you can see in this video, Isaac is very thankful for that hard time that we went through where he had to transition to a healing diet, and it was so worthwhile for him. Here's his story. Today we have my son Isaac with us. Hey, Isaac.
G'day, how are you?
So you guys have heard Isaac's story of healing with GAPS, but I think it's really powerful to hear it from the horse's mouth, especially if you've got kids or teenagers, or there's young people in your family that need to do GAPS or need to at least have a more healthy diet or eat some kind of special diet, and they're a bit resistant to it. It's good for them to hear from a young person what they found helpful and how it went for them. So this video is especially for young people, and it's also for the parents of young people who just need some encouragement that there is hope. If you can just share a bit of your story and how it all began, and yeah, I think it'll be good for you to tell the story instead of me this time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, it all started about 12 years ago, or at least as far as my memory, that was when it began to affect my life. 2013, I remember fairly clearly just these urges to do things that no one else was doing. It was as if I had to keep control of my universe or my life. There were like these factors outside my control, and I had to try and control them as far as things like diseases and things like bad things happening to people around me. And obviously, that's quite a bit of a first sign of OCD. We didn't realize what it was at the time. But I just remember having to constantly perform these compulsions and these actions to try and feel better, or to try and prevent things from happening to myself or to other people. And it began with me, like I was learning about diseases in schoolwork in year 7. And I just remember a lot of these diseases, I would be afraid that I'd get them if I didn't form right while learning about them. So it was as if things like polio and things like that, if I didn't write these letters the right way, the amount of width between the two parts of the cursive R and the letters, and the what order I wrote the words, things like that. If I didn't do it all right, I would get these diseases that I was learning and studying. So I would be constantly trying to replace that with something else in my mind and just control somehow what happened to me. It was this overwhelming need to do and perform. It was almost a superstitious sort of desire to, or an impulse to, control the things around me. So that began to affect my life a lot. We did go see a GP. As far as how I felt, sorry to go back to your question, very confused, very, I guess, it was probably less confusion though than it was just a feeling of obligation. I just felt like it was just inherent in my brain that I had to do this. And it's a shame that other people they don't understand me, but I have to do these things in order that I and my family will be safe. And so that grew and grew and grew. And we went to the doctor. It was sort of early stages. And again, back then it wasn't nearly as common, although,
Well, maybe we
uh,
just hadn't heard about it.
yeah, we at least hadn't come across the resources that we needed to understand what to actually do. So after a little while, I think you pulled on my diet a little bit. And my anxiety sort of just subsided a little bit. I was able to do better in schoolwork. And then fast forward about 8 or 9 months until the middle of 2014. And that was when things really started to go pear-shaped for me. It all sort of came back with a vengeance. But at this point, I felt absolutely and completely powerless. No matter how hard I tried to do these compulsions, no matter how hard I tried to say the right things, to walk through the doorway with the right thought in my head, to repeat turning off and on the light in the bedroom enough times, exactly right, so that I wouldn't get a disease or I wouldn't impulsively hurt someone. I would have to put the knife in the drawer the right way. Otherwise, I was sort of showing a almost murderous intent against my family. I would have to sometimes I would get people to participate. I would have to get my brother to repeat an action and I would have to watch him. And it was quite exhausting for everybody in the family at the time, especially not understanding what was actually happening. So in my mind, it was this obligation. It was this, I have to do this. I just have to do this. And the more I did it and thought I was freeing myself from that, the worse, the more entangled I became in these thought processes and compulsions. So um, we especially as a family, and of course, Mum was scrambling to try and find a solution for me. We knew that there was something going on with my mental health, obviously, um, but we just didn't really know where to start. Do you want to say anything to that?
So yeah, I just wasn't really sure what in the world was going on. I thought he was suddenly being really superstitious and having all these phobias that yeah, he was afraid of things happening to him if he didn't do certain actions. And I had no idea that was OCD. At the time, I thought OCD was being scared of germs, washing your hands a lot. Yeah, the germ phobia. I thought that's what OCD was. And I remember one day I just decided to look up OCD. For some reason, it popped into my head, and he had every single one of the symptoms. And there was things like phobias of people that were completely irrational. And he had a phobia of a little girl who was like 5 years old, and there was no reason for it. There was all sorts of things that I was like, yep, 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 yep. And so that's when we took him to the doctor again and said, I think this is what it is. I think it's OCD. So yeah, you go on, Isaac.
Yeah, no, and she essentially confirmed that diagnosis or made it formal. As soon as we came in with the symptoms, and this was the second time we'd visited that GP, I believe. But this time, I think there was probably more context, and it was probably a little bit more, I guess, time for us to reflect over it. And we came and said, "Hey, look, this is the symptoms," and she said, "Yes, that is what that is." So right away, we went into psychology, and
Medication.
and I do want to make it pretty clear as well to anyone listening who may have children with these symptoms. The main symptom was repeating actions. So with sort of stock standard OCD, not OCPD or pure OCD, those two things are also kind of different. Stock standard OCD diagnosis is the need to repeat actions through compulsions to alleviate some sort of obsession. So the obsessive compulsive disorder. You get an obsession about sickness or about some disease or about something bad happening, and then you get a compulsion that you have to perform in order to relieve yourself of the crushing feeling of that obsession. So I was repeating things all the time, and we went to the doctor, and she prescribed us with some medication, and that was my first probably couple of weeks of relief after quite some time. The medication worked almost instantly, and I probably was about 60% better within a couple of weeks. And of course, underneath, we were beginning to do other things as well with the dieting and such. And I'm sure you're getting to that. But that was sort of when the journey really started to begin. Because when we started taking those professional measures, getting on antidepressants, going to the psychologist, or that, we realized, okay, we really need to figure out what the root issue is here. And I guess you can take it from there.
So that's when we really dove into the GAPS protocol, as we've talked about in other videos. Um, Isaac, how did you feel when I explained what we were going to do with the diet? Because this is what I think a lot of parents fear is the absolute meltdown of their kids when they say, no, you can't have that anymore. We're going to be eating this particular way to help you get better. How did you feel at first when I told you what we'd be doing?
I felt emotional. There's definitely that emotional attachment to the foods that you love, and that is a very scientific thing.
Mm.
Um, it's the gut bacteria screaming out for what they want to eat, and
Hurrah!
you know what your body wants to be fed on. So yes, I was emotional. I wouldn't say I was angry or full of temper tantrums per se. It was more just
Mm.
and I did know, even in my 13-year-old mind, that this was something that was absolutely necessary for me. So it wasn't a thing of rebellion so much. It was more, what am I going to do? I remember in the first week of doing gaps, I remember laying in bed crying one night because I couldn't have dried banana. Um, and it was that sort of thing. It was just emotions, lots of emotions. But it
Mm.
was always part of the detoxing process. When I started, those emotions just had come out, and it wasn't just emotions. It was, it was physical changes in my body. There was a lot of weirdness going on in my poo. There was a lot of headaches. There was a lot of lethargy, particularly lethargy. I couldn't get around, and I just didn't have the energy in the first few days.
We had
Um,
a lot of muscle aches, like fatigue, like flu symptoms at first.
Yes. I remember feeling like I had a flu for 3 or 4 days,
Mm.
first few days of gaps. But after that, it was just my brain completely cleared. I remember within a week, I was checking the computer every day, looking at websites as to the different stages of gaps. It became a game for me. I was excited about having scrambled eggs. I was excited about having raw veggies,
Roast pumpkin. You were so
roast
excited
pumpkin.
about roast
Just
pumpkin.
it's so funny because I say to people I don't even cook with it anymore now that I don't live at home. I
Probably
never
got
eat pumpkin.
probably overdid it.
I don't know what it was, but I never eat it now unless I'm at your place or at other people's places or get given some. But it was very emotional, very upsetting at first, and to my body and to my mind. But within a week, it was amazing because not only did I have that clarity of mind and that energy back, I was already feeling better. I had that band-aid of the medication, plus already there was healing in my body, a lot of that bacteria dying off, and then it just turned into a game for me. It was like, this is great. I no longer expected or craved that junk food. I was looking forward to the next thing to bring into the protocol. So
It was kind of like maybe even a bit of your OCD tendencies that he knew every ingredient and food that he was allowed to have on each stage. And I would go, oh, well, wait, you can have some of this. And he'd be like, no, I can't have that yet. He'd be telling me, and I'll be like, oh,
that
okay.
was very obsessive. It
Yeah.
really did turn into an obsession. But there's one thing I've learned about myself is that there always has to be some point of focus in my life. I
Mm.
don't know whether some people have said that's ADHD. I haven't got a diagnosis for ADHD. I wouldn't be surprised. Um, but it's very much this thing of I need to constantly have something that I'm doing in my life. Right now, it's starting a business and working on my life here in Brisbane. But back then I had to be playing games. I had to have a hobby. I had to be doing sports. I had to be, it was the Rubik's Cube for a long time.
Mm.
It had to be something. And so for me at that time, it was just the protocol. Like I was just obsessed with, okay, 3 more days. If I don't have a runny nose in 3 days, I can bring in scrambled eggs. This is so exciting. And it was just this constant, it was so much fun. I love it. I
It's like
really look
levels
back.
of a game.
Yeah, exactly. I look back with so much fondness because of that. But it was just pushing through that initial wall of
Yeah.
resistance in my body and my mind to the new foods that I was eating. And then once you get through that, it was amazing experience. Loved it.
I think for parents who have kids who are resisting to even start, I often say it was a matter of desperation for us. And when you get desperate enough, you make those hard changes.
Yeah,
And I think even for Isaac, he knew that it felt like this is our only hope. That's what it felt like, didn't it?
yeah,
Um,
definitely so. Yeah,
mm,
exactly. Um, and I had to go through that because of desperation in order to realize how helpful it was going to be for me. So if that's any encouragement to any of you out there's children who are resistant to start, and you as a parent may be resistant to force that upon them, absolutely understandable. But as someone who's been through it, the only solution was to just start.
mm,
And
just do
I,
it.
I really I pray for all of you that you're able to get through that early wall because once you do, it's such a great experience.
Yeah. And we've talked all through this program about gradually easing into gut healing foods. But there comes a time where you finally have to make the decision if you need to dive deeper, to cut out the starchy foods and just go for it. So you can sort of ease in slowly to a point, and then eventually you've got to make that decision whether you're going to do that. And I think for us, we did for years, we'd been sort of heading that direction really, because we'd been eating gluten-free for a long time. We'd been eating mostly grain-free,
Mostly
but
dairy free.
mostly dairy-free because I couldn't handle dairy and you guys weren't great with it.
I
You
couldn't.
weren't. Um, and just finding that it wasn't enough. Like we said in the first video in this module, that all these great changes that we were making with our diet, it just wasn't quite enough. It didn't, like the bucket was still overflowing, and we needed to find a way to stop that happening. And once we started to really take out those foods that are super hard to digest, really focus on those nutrient dense foods and slow down and pull back on the things that were causing a lot of stress, detoxing. So there was the magnesium baths, we used essential oils, we got the whole house filtered so that we didn't bathe in water with chlorine and chemicals in it. We drank filtered water. We like really we're much more careful with body products and cleaning products. And so every area that I could think of, we tried to reduce toxins so that, I'm sure you've all heard of the bucket analogy, that you're just constantly putting these things into your bucket and it seems like a small thing. You're like, oh, that deodorant won't matter, or that perfume won't matter, or those smelly candles won't matter, or whatever it is, those ultra refined snacks that the kids love, that's just one thing, everything in moderation. But it's because it's like all these things adding up to a body that's already struggling to cope with digesting food and healing, and detoxing, and it's just too much. So once you just take that load off, it's like your body just breathes a sigh of relief and starts to heal, very quickly for kids, very quickly.
Makes me think of the I've been reading Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Atomic
Just started
Habits
on
is
it,
good.
and yeah, and it talks about the 1% rule. I don't know. I think it's the 1% rule. It's changing your life in lots of areas in very small ways.
Mm.
So, the illustration of the cycling team, the UK cycling team, that it hadn't won a Tour de France ever and hadn't won a major cycling event in 110 years or something crazy. And so their new coach started improving their habits in like by 1%, if that, in a bunch of different areas, like changing the color of the bus they were riding on, changing a whole bunch of different habits that they were doing. And within 4 or 5 years, they were winning back to back to back,
But it
you know,
wasn't bus.
oh, not exactly,
Tell us
but
some of the other changes.
yeah, there were a whole bunch of different changes. I need to actually, go read that yourself, guys. It's awesome. Um, but yeah, I mean, we were looking at every single potential facet in our lives and going, how can we improve that for better gut health and better health in general, and fixing these problems, and it worked. It
And
it
you're
really
right, it
worked.
was small changes because people will say to me, "Did you eat 100% organic? Did you?" I'm like, "No, we didn't. It wasn't perfect. It was never perfect. Our whole healing journey, like I didn't realize the importance of short cooked meat stocks when we were doing early gaps. And so we were having long cooked bone broths, but somehow we still healed because we changed in a small way, we changed so many things that it just really reduced that load and we were able to heal.
Mhm.
And then as time went on, we kept tweaking things and learning more. And I think we got to about a year into gaps. And then we started taking a few supplements that were helpful. Like that first year, it was all food. We didn't even take any supplements.
No.
And then we started taking I think you guys started having some magnesium and different things, and that really helped with anxiety, and sleep. So it was a gradual thing in that way. Yeah. And
Yeah.
how do you feel? I think I like speaking to parents now. How do you feel that that really has helped going forward, like long term? Because that was what, 11 years ago now we started that journey. And obviously it was just for a couple of years and then we eased back into whole foods.
Mhm.
How do you feel that that has helped you in your adult life?
Probably the most, I always envisioned that I would have had a journey to healing that would have been alternate if we hadn't have done that. But the way that came about, and the way that that all happened really built my faith in alternate ways of healing. And food is probably the biggest part of that, and that's a big
It shouldn't
recommendation.
be an alternate way of healing. It should be the main way.
It should be
But
one of the main ways of healing for
these
sure,
days, it's
absolutely.
considered alternate.
But it really opened my mind up, I think, is what it was, to the fact that, first of all, there's hope when you're going through these things. I remember the amount of days I would sit there and I had this vision in my mind of this cave and I was just stuck and I just couldn't get out of it. And it was like suddenly I could see light at the end of the tunnel.
Mhm.
And the fact that you can reach that through something like food, the way that God has designed us to eat, we eat that way. I think that is absolutely so powerful. And really what it was more than just the healing, which I've hopefully carried into my adult life. I believe I have. I mean, OCD doesn't control me anymore.
Yay.
But yeah, yeah. But also just the mindset that it's put into me as an adult that first of all persist, find a solution, work on it, and make it happen. Don't let yourself be stuck in a downward spiral. It's just not worth it. Um, even if you can't commit to a big diet like GAPS, a huge commitment like that, just make other commitments. Do something. Act. Get into that upward spiral. Because once you start doing that, these slow things and finding that encouragement, it works this way in business, in life, in healing, in faith, whatever it is. Start building, and that spiral will go up. And that's probably the mindset that I think I've taken on since that experience 11 years ago, was that there's always a way. It's pretty stereotypical, but it's true. And when you've experienced it, then you actually start to believe it.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, I think people will find that really helpful. I know a lot of people have gotten hope from your story, and I even had a message just yesterday from a lady who had been through a major health journey, and I think it all started in like 2011. And she said when you came out and told your story with your son in 2014, that changed everything for her. And she started working on her health and changed everything with her health. And she said now, she was giving me an update on where she is now. And she said it started with hearing your son's story. And
Wow.
yeah, and I get those messages a lot. And I think back to that time where you were laying on the lounge room floor, bawling your eyes out before we'd found answers. And I was madly searching on the internet, trying to find stories of people who'd healed from OCD. And I found a story of a guy and I read it to you, and he had gone through a terrible time with OCD and had come out of it. Um, Obviously, there was still some symptoms because there always is some things that you struggle with, but he was living a normal life, working a job that he loved. And when I read that to you, you just stopped crying like that. And then you said, you sat up and you're like, you mean people can get over this and heal from this? And I said, yep. And then you stood up and you were like, right, let's do this. And that was the switch. I just remember that so clearly. And the importance of hearing other people's stories and knowing that there is hope and there's something that you can do makes all the difference.
So yeah, I mean, and I hear those stories, and it just blows my mind because it's very, I guess the word's humbling, but more it is surreal. It's surreal to think that someone's heard your story
Mm,
and been able to make a big change in their life because of that. And so I always say this to people: share your story, whatever you're going through, and share your progress. Whatever you like, whether it's a community group, whether it's social media, just find a community that cares about you and share your story.
yeah.
And I think that's kind of really the catalyst of your business, Mum, is sharing our family's story and your own story. And that's kind of been how we've ended up where we are today because of that. So yeah, I think it's pretty incredible.
And maybe just give everyone a little update on where you're at now, how your health's going, and what you're doing in life.
Well, I'll just
Can
see
you
if
turn the computer
yeah,
around?
see if I turn the computer out. I'm living here
See if we
in
can. Oh, look
Paddington.
at
It's a
that.
nice little view of the city there. I always wanted to live in a city for a little while, and I'm enjoying it now.
Having his
Um,
adventure,
yeah,
2,000 kilometers away from mum.
yes, but I'm still in Queensland, so I feel like I'm still among my people, which is good. And running a business Started a year and a half ago, and it's very slow growth, but it's growing and it's happening, and it's been a really good learning experience. Um, Definitely a challenge I wanted to take on at some point in my life, so it's happening now. And what else is going on? Yeah, I
How
don't
do you
know.
feel like how do you feel like your mental health is now, if you want to talk
Best
mental
it's ever
health?
been.
Yeah.
Best it's ever been. It's a thing of layers. So I've said that almost every year since 2014.
Hmm.
Um, I've said, oh, my mental health is the best it's ever been. But then I've gone through another crisis that's really unraveled something that I never really knew was there, whether it's insecurity or depression or desire for control, or something like that.
Mm.
And it's always sort of been this thing of every few years I go through something in my life that teaches me something new. And so
Don't we all?
now, yeah. And so I do feel like in 2025 that I am the most mentally and emotionally and spiritually strong I've ever been in my life.
Mm.
And you'll always feel like that if you're on an upward spiral. And I believe I'm on an upward spiral. And so that's where trajectory is the most important thing. And you will fall back sometimes. I've had plenty of times with my diet, particularly, where I've had some setbacks, whether that's through slackness or busyness or whatever. But you just keep walking forward, and again, it's these lessons, not so much in the physical sense, but what I've learned from these experiences that has really propelled me forward and kept me going forward as an adult. So yeah, I mean, I'm doing well.
Yeah, so good. If anyone wants to know more about Isaac and how he's doing and his business and anything like that, you can contact him on Instagram, Facebook. Wavelength Tech is his business. I can put the link below. Um, he does support for tech support online as well as in person, and he's doing kind of like tutoring with kids as well with tech
I'm calling it tech coaching because it sounds cool.
coaching.
And
So
I'm not a teacher. So yes, I always say tech coaching, but yes,
tech
that
coaching.
and then
Yeah,
primarily tech support for small businesses. So
yeah. So it's good to see. Like I know a lot of you have known his story since he was young, and it's so wonderful to see him going forward and moving in the right direction, and also hopefully mostly eating well. I think so.
yes, well, yeah,
We all have our ups and
up and down.
downs,
Yes,
as you say, and
I'm
living
not
on
eating
your
as
own.
well as I was when I lived with you.
Yes, I
That's
was going to say when you're not living with mum, it does change things, but
yeah,
that's
a little
part of
bit.
the learning process of growing up, isn't it?
Definitely.
All right. Thank you, Zach. And I hope
Thank
you
you.
enjoyed that.